Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are just stopping by, please hit that subscribe button before you leave here today. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. My name is Christina and I started this YouTube channel to just kind of give some information about my cancer journey and also to give you some tips and tricks to help you out with your journey. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my chemotherapy journey. And first of all, I want to apologize for not posting as often. Sometimes these videos can get a little emotional for me to record, and so I kind of put it off a little bit until I'm really emotionally ready to record them. And for those of you that are new here, once I was diagnosed and right before I started my chemotherapy, my father actually passed away in a river rafting accident. So for me to talk about my journey, there's a lot of emotion involved with it outside of cancer. And so I just want to let you know that so you kind of know where I'm coming from in that situation. After I was diagnosed, which was July 26th of 2016, I then had my port placement done on August 10th, where my lung had collapsed, but I didn't know it. And a couple days later, I found myself in the hospital with a chest tube for 4 or so days. And that all happened right before my father passed. So I talked about that in part of my cancer journey before. I just wanted to preface that if you're just tuning into this portion of my cancer journey. I started chemotherapy on August 16th, 2016. I had been diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer in my right breast. The tumor was about 1.3 centimeters, so not very big. It was something that I had found on my own and with the urging of a friend had gone in to get it checked out. With the triple positive breast cancer, it was both estrogen and progesterone driven as well as HER2 positive. So it was pretty important that I start chemotherapy right after I was diagnosed. Sorry about that. The chemotherapy drugs that they had me on were Carboplatin, Taxotere, Herceptin, and Perjeta. Now, all these things that I want to talk to you about today are my opinion. I don't want to sway any of your decisions. I don't want to put any fear in you. I'm just sharing my story, my journey, what I experienced. And I don't want to put it in your head, how I felt after, day 3 or 4 or whatever. I don't want to put that in your head that that's how you are going to feel. I know that there's a lot of people that once they get it in their mind, they think, oh, that's exactly what everybody's supposed to feel like. I did it myself. My friend that had also had triple positive breast cancer and went through the same chemo drugs, she had nothing go wrong with her. She felt great throughout her whole journey. And so I had that expectation that, oh, well, this isn't going to be that big of a deal. And then I was sorely mistaken. Of course, you'll find that out here in a second. But so I started on August 16th. Now the Carboplatin and the Taxotere, that's just some normal chemotherapy drugs that you'd go through with breast cancer. But the Perjeta and the Herceptin are specifically targeted toward that HER2 positive protein receptor to help to eradicate that out of the body. And it's something that obviously is throughout your whole body. It's not something that's just targeted to the breast cancer, but is targeted to those HER2 positive sites, which are throughout the whole body. So one of the things that they talked to me about, and I also had tested, was my heart. And they say the Perjeta and the Herceptin can affect the heart. And so I went through something what they call the MUGA test before I started my chemo. And that's just measuring the output of the heart. I don't know too much about it. I've been through a billion of them, but I don't know too much about it. I just know that they're measuring the output and making sure that it's within normal range. So I started August 16th, and shortly after that, that's when I started losing some hair. I do have that video recorded about my hair loss journey, so I'll post that below if it's something that you want to see. But after that, I started to feel a little yucky after my first round. So I would say the first few days after chemo, every single time, I felt pretty good. In fact, I thought that I was going to be sick the next day or something like that. But I felt pretty darn good for a few days. Let's say I had it on a Tuesday. By Saturday is when I started feeling down in the dumps. It was the next 10 days after those first few days of feeling good that I felt really cruddy. I was treatment planned for 6 rounds of chemo and once every 3 weeks, and then they wanted to have me go through radiation treatment and then a lumpectomy. That was my original treatment plan. And that's what I thought, okay, well, this is what they're telling me to do. This is what's going to happen. Meanwhile, I was having the testing done for the genetic testing to find out if I had the genetic mutation, in which case they would have changed my treatment plan to having a double mastectomy and a hysterectomy. It was something that they thought was going to return back positive because of my huge family history of breast cancer. However, I tested negative. So once I found that out, I thought, okay, here's my treatment plan: chemo, radiation, and then my lumpectomy. And deep down in my heart, the whole time I was thinking, I want to test positive for this genetic marker, thinking that I would get a double mastectomy, because it was something I always said since I was young. If I ever got breast cancer, because of my huge family history, then I would just get a double mastectomy. But I didn't think that it's something that I could do, because I didn't think insurance would cover it unless I had tested positive for this genetic marker. So when it came back negative, I was a little disappointed. Now, chemo wasn't something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to pursue some natural remedies outside of it, but every time I talked about it to the doctors, it was difficult because that's something that they push for. And there was something in me the whole time thinking, oh my gosh, this is not what I want. I've heard so many horror stories about chemo, being sick, having the massive side effects that come with it, not just when you're going through chemo, but years down the road. And so I always had this little inkling inside me that thought, I don't want to do chemo. But, I thought, all these doctors are telling me that I have so much of a percentage of life expectancy if I go through with it. And so when you have that fear or that thought, well, gosh, I have a higher percentage of not surviving, then of course chemo is something that you're going to do, as much as you don't want to do it. And so after a lot of thought and a lot of prayer and talking with my family, I made the decision to go through with chemo. Like I'd already said, I started on August 16th. And after my first round, I felt pretty darn sick. I dreaded going in for my second round. I experienced mouth sores, dry mouth, diarrhea like crazy. That's something that I've talked about on my channel quite a bit. And the reason why I want to say that is it's kind of an embarrassing thing, but it was something that I dealt with from my first round until my last round. And then when I added that second round of chemo on top of it, it just compounded how I felt, and it made me feel pretty darn sick. Again, every single round of chemo that I had, the first few days I felt great. And then maybe day 4 through 10. Actually, I would say day 4 through 14, there was a good 10-day period where I felt pretty cruddy. And then day 15 to day 21, because again, I had it once every 3 weeks, I felt great again. It got to where my girls at work, we had it figured out for what days I would need off. So I would work the first few days after chemo, and once that Saturday hit, I would take the whole next week off of work, and that's so that I could recover and be at home because I felt that bad. Again, I don't want this to scare you. I don't want to put it in your head that this is how you are going to feel. This is how I felt on my journey. Now, after that second round, like I was saying, I was feeling pretty cruddy, and at this point I had to go into my general practitioner. I had an IUD that I had to have removed because of the hormones that are in it, and because of the hormone-driven cancer, they don't want anything to progress that. So I had the IUD taken out and then met with my doctor, and when the nurse was in taking my blood pressure and just chatting with me, she said, I just want you to know that breast cancer was something I went through recently. I opted out of chemo and just had a double mastectomy, and that of course put a little light bulb in my head. I said, I go, you had a double mastectomy, were you treatment planned for that, or was that something that was because you tested positive for the genetic marker? And she said, no, it's something that because I'm in this industry, I knew I could do, and I didn't want to go through chemo. So I automatically felt this connection with her, and she was really great with answering some of my questions. I said, well, how did you get insurance to pay for it if it's something that, you didn't have this genetic marker and it wasn't something treatment planned? And she said that quite a few years ago, it was something, this law was passed that if you chose a double mastectomy, that you would be able to have insurance cover it, that insurance was required by law to cover it. And I said, what? This is great news. So I told my husband about it, and I got really excited, and I had a long night of no sleep and thinking, do I do what she did? Do I just have the double mastectomy and quit chemo? Because I was feeling so horrible. And I made that decision after my second round of chemo that I just wanted the double mastectomy. And I had gone in and I talked to my doctor, my oncologist, and I said, I don't want to do chemo anymore. I just want the double mastectomy. What are your thoughts on this? And she said, there's no studies out there. There's no scientific studies that say you would have any X amount of survival rate. They would think they would I'm trying to think of the word. They project thinking that you wouldn't be able to increase your chances of survival, let's say, that it would decrease your chance of survival, but there's no scientific theory that says it. There's no scientific evidence out there that says it. And she said, I feel like this would increase your chances of not surviving or having a return of cancer. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just really don't want to do this anymore. I felt horrible and really felt like the long-lasting effects of chemo were really weighing me down. So after I talked to the doctor, I felt a little discouraged and said, okay, I'll continue with my chemo. And I ended up going in for my third round of chemo. And right after that, I started to feel really sick. I was in there every single day they're open Monday through Friday, so I don't want to say every single day, but every single day that they were open, I was in there getting hydration, and that's because I couldn't keep anything down. I couldn't even fathom eating anything. About the only thing I could eat was watermelon, which was awesome for weight loss. That was the best part about it. However, that's just no way to live when you can't drink water and you can't eat. And so I was in there quite often getting fluids, and because of that, they were taking my blood pressure, of course, every single time, and then during my chemo treatments, they're taking my blood levels and things like that. They found me to be severely neutropenic, and at that point, the fear of chemo started to set in for me, and I was scared to go to the emergency room. I was scared to go out in public because I was so neutropenic that I could get a cold and not be able to fight it off. Something so simple, I think 0.5 was my white blood cell count. 0.5. It was really low, but not low enough to where I was hospitalized. However, they were finding that my heart rate was completely it was skyrocketing. So let's say I was there for 2 hours getting hydration, they would come and test my heart rate at the end of that, sitting still for 2 hours. And my heart rate was 120, 130, just sitting there. And then they would have me do a standing heart rate. So they would take my heart rate and blood pressure, and then I would stand and they would take it again. My highest of resting heart rate after standing was 166. And at that point, they had me go to the ER. They wanted to have a whole bunch of tests done. They did a blood test, urine test, everything possible, and they couldn't figure out what was going on with my heart. So they put me on antibiotics, and that was just to maybe fight off any infection that I might have that might be causing that extreme heart rate. So from my third chemo treatment through that whole 3 weeks, I was in the oncology clinic quite often and having that done, and they were a little concerned about my heart rate. And then when I went in for my fourth round of chemo, I had an appointment with the oncologist before my round of chemo, and she said that they were concerned about my heart, and because they were so concerned about it, that they wanted to end my chemo after the fourth round, which was that day. And I was so grateful. I just wanted to hug her so much. So I went in for my fourth round and last round of chemo, and I was pretty darn excited about that. I remember after my third round of chemo, I kept thinking, I'm halfway there, I'm halfway there. And to be able to have it cut short early was awesome. But of course you have that in your mind where you sit there and go, I didn't have the full 6 rounds that suggested. What does that mean for me? But I felt that by having the double mastectomy, that there would be some sort of positive effect with that. I think it was the end of October is when I finished my fourth round of chemo, and I had already met with the plastic surgeon and had already made my decision about having that double mastectomy, and he wanted me to wait a whole 30 days before I could go in for my double mastectomy. So I ended my fourth round in October, end of October, and I had to wait until December 10th to have my mastectomy. Don't want to put any fear in you. My heart was extremely affected by the chemotherapy drugs, and they didn't know which one it was. Their suspicion was that it was the Perjeta. Now, the Herceptin was something that I would continue for a whole year. That's why I still have my port. I'm still getting infusions. I have 2 more Herceptin infusions left, and then I'm done with it. I'm super excited about that. But they were concerned because Herceptin can affect the heart as well. I go in every 6 weeks still and have a mugga test on my heart just to see how it's functioning. And once I quit the Taxotere, the Carboplatin, and the Perjeta, I have had no heart issues since. So the Herceptin hasn't been affecting me at all. And that's why I really want to stress that to you is many people go through this and have 0 side effects. And there's some people that have just the nausea side effects, and then there are some people like me who got to have the heart side effect, which was a really big bummer. But you know, I'm still pretty grateful about it because I got to quit chemo early, so I was pretty happy about that. One of the things I did want to say, and I don't want to make it sound like I was just sick all the time. I was sick quite a bit, and it really affected my life. However, I was still able to work through it. And one of the biggest things that I discovered was positive self-talk. I have always been a fan of positive self-talk. And so I would constantly sit and tell myself, you're going to get through this, you're going to get through this, you're going to make it through this. And I really feel like that helped. I kept a smile on my face even when I felt down and out. I really kept a smile on my face and tried. Of course, you're not wanting to get up, you're not wanting to do things, but I really didn't want it to affect my life entirely. And I didn't want my kids to see me down like that as well, but I really felt like talking myself through it really helped me out throughout my journey. And I did also want to say they couldn't figure out what was going on with my heart. And I thoroughly believe that having my dad die in the middle of all these shenanigans didn't help my heart. And I don't want you to think that this might happen to you. I really do feel like there were a lot of other effects that happened, and I really do feel like there were a lot of outside things that affected that, and the death of my father really hit me hard and made my chemo journey a little bit more difficult than I think it normally would have. And so my nausea and problems with my heart, I don't know, it could have been partially because of everything I was experiencing emotionally as well. So again, and I know I've said it several times now, please don't let my story affect how you feel and are. I don't want that to happen, and get that in your mind that this is how you will feel. I just feel like my circumstance was a little bit different, and I do feel like it affected it differently as well. I think that's it. So this is, gosh, I think my third part 3 of my cancer journey. I did have one talking just about my diagnosis and with my dad dying, and then about losing my hair, and now this was my chemotherapy part of the journey. My next one that I do want to record is that mastectomy one that I was talking to you about, and I'm really looking forward to that. I really hope that a lot of people find it helpful. Again, if you find any questions that you want me to answer in that video, just let me know down below in the comments, and of course I will try to address those throughout the recording process. Again, thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I really appreciate your love and support that you guys have been giving me. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you leave here today. And if you enjoyed today's video, give me a thumbs up. With that being said, I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you.